Let me describe you for a second. You don't ask for help, not because you don't need it, but because needing it makes you uncomfortable. You'd rather stay up until 3 a.m. solving a problem alone than pick up the phone and ask someone who could solve it in 5 minutes. You call it strength. You call it self-reliance. But here's what the Stoics understood, and what modern psychology has since confirmed. There's a version of independence that isn't strength at all. It's a wound that learned to look like one. And if you can't trust anyone, the problem might not be everyone else.
Hyper-independence doesn't start as a philosophy. It starts as a survival strategy. Somewhere in your past, maybe childhood, maybe a relationship, maybe a moment where you needed someone and they weren't there, you made a decision. I'll never need anyone like that again. Trauma psychologists call this insecure avoidant attachment, a pattern that forms when early experiences teach the nervous system that depending on others leads to disappointment, abandonment, or pain. So the brain adapts. It builds walls, not out of strength, out of protection. And here's where it gets complicated. Those walls work for a while. You become capable, self-sufficient, impressive even. But walls don't discriminate. They keep the people who would hurt you out, and they keep the people who could help you out too. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus wrote, "Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life." In other words, fighting reality, including the reality that humans need each other, is not wisdom. It is resistance. And resistance exhausts you. Here's where most people get Stoicism completely wrong. They read Marcus Aurelius. They read Epictetus. They walk away thinking Stoicism means feeling nothing, needing nothing, depending on no one. That is not Stoicism. That is emotional suppression with a philosophy label on it. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, wrote privately in his Meditations, "We are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth." The man who commanded armies and governed millions understood that human beings are not built for isolation. Real Stoicism is about mastering your response to the world, not about removing yourself from it. It's about choosing who you trust wisely, not deciding that trust itself is a weakness. The hyper-independent person took one half of Stoicism, emotional control, and left the other half behind. The half that says you are part of something larger than yourself.
Let's get specific, because this isn't just philosophical. Research from Brigham Young University found that social isolation carries the same mortality risk as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Not metaphorically, literally, physiologically. The human nervous system is wired for connection. When that connection is chronically absent, cortisol levels rise, immune function drops, and the brain's threat detection system stays permanently activated. You're not just lonely, you're biologically stressed. And here's the part that hits hardest. Hyper-independent people are often the last to admit this, because admitting it feels like proof that the walls failed. But the walls didn't fail. The walls did exactly what walls do. They protected you, and then they imprisoned you. You stopped trusting people who lied to you, and ended up not trusting anyone at all. You stopped depending on people who let you down, and ended up carrying everything. That's not freedom. That's a different kind of truth.
So what does Stoicism actually tell us to do with this? Seneca wrote, "Withdraw into yourself as much as you can, but also receive those who will make you better. Admit those whom you are capable of making better." That is the Stoic answer to hyper-independence. Not blind trust, not opening yourself to everyone. Selective, intentional, earned trust. The Stoics didn't say trust everyone. They said discern carefully, and then trust completely. Here's what that looks like practically. You stop treating all people as potential threats because a few people prove to be actual ones. You stop punishing present relationships for damage done by past ones. You start asking, not can I trust anyone, but what would someone need to demonstrate before I extend trust to them? That question is not weakness. That is wisdom. That is exactly the kind of rational, evidence-based thinking the Stoics spent their entire lives developing. So what does Stoicism actually tell us to do with this? Seneca wrote, "Withdraw into yourself as much as you can, but also receive those who will make you better. Admit those whom you are capable of making better." That is the Stoic answer to hyper-independence. Not blind trust, not opening yourself to everyone. Selective, intentional, earned trust. The Stoics didn't say trust everyone. They said discern carefully, and then trust completely. Here's what that looks like practically. You stop treating all people as potential threats because a few people prove to be actual ones. You stop punishing present relationships for damage done by past ones. You start asking, not can I trust anyone, but what would someone need to demonstrate before I extend trust to them? That question is not weakness. That is wisdom. That is exactly the kind of rational, evidence-based thinking the Stoics spent their entire lives developing.
Here's the truth I want you to sit with. The version of you that decided to need no one was doing the best it could with what it had. That decision made sense at the time. It kept you safe. It kept you functional. It got you here. But you're not in that moment anymore. And carrying a survival strategy into a life that no longer requires it isn't strength. It's loyalty to a version of yourself that was built for a war that's already over. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Your inability to trust isn't a character flaw. It's pointing at exactly where the work is. And the work, the real work, is not learning to trust everyone. It's learning to trust yourself enough to know who deserves it. Drop a comment. I built the walls. Now I choose who enters. Subscribe, because next we go even deeper into the psychology of self-protection, identity, and the patterns that keep brilliant people stuck.